The Palestinian population on the planet is like 15 million people. 2.2 million of us are locked up in that concentration camp. It's not like we are from a different society. We're the same society that have been fragmented and dispossessed and destroyed, surviving attempts of its destruction for the past 75 years. How do people mobilize? Like, you have school kids in school in the classrooms, like, let's go out and protest. Like, anybody with a TV, anybody with a mobile phone, anybody that actually looks at what's happening, we know we don't have the power to stop it. We're subject to it, but silence is not an option. We have to express our rejection to what's going on. So it's almost on every different level, on the level of schools, and the level of universities, and the level of just people in society. What can we do? Like, we have to take to the streets. So you do what you can over here. The protests around the world reaffirm to each and every participant of those protests that they do believe in the fact that everyone is born free and equal, and they do recognize that what prevents that equality from happening is the state of Israel. You don't have to be a pro-Palestinian to see that Israel is a savage apartheid regime. What you need to do to be is like a decent person who believes that everyone is born free and equal. What does it mean to us? What it means to us is that, oh wow, like, we're being murdered and oppressed while other people are watching. Those protests, like, once again, it's amazing that people come out to the street to protest Israeli criminal behavior. It's also amazing that it's not violent. It's in the best interest of the state of Israel is to turn those protests into violent actions. And like, I've seen some protests that were like fistfights was initiated by defenders and supporters of the state of Israel. If I'm a defender or a supporter of a criminal regime like the state of Israel, and I hear that the victims of my savage and racist conduct are going to protest in a street, like, why the hell would I go to that street? Unless, like, I really want to provoke and show some action, show 1,000 people beating the hell out of like a small group of people, and that image actually works, because it doesn't matter. Like, what you need is like one defender of Israeli apartheid and Israeli criminal behavior to be attacked by 10 people who are so desperate for this genocide to stop. And then you can turn the story around and you can say, like, Jew haters attacked a poor Israeli person in the streets of this or that. And then you have that story. Like, PR and propaganda is like, you can see the legacy of propaganda, of Israeli propaganda, like throughout the coverage of the past 75 years. In what world is the state of Israel a democracy other than in an imaginary world? In what world is the state of Israel anything but an apartheid regime other than in an imaginary world? But there's a lot of people who live in those imaginary worlds. The other problem I see with protests, and I really want to be honest with all those who stand in support for peace and justice in Palestine. My oppressor has an office in your country. That office is not a public space. That office is not the presidential palace. That office is not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That office is not any of the places where you go for a protest. That office is called the Israeli Embassy. When you want to protest against Israeli genocide and Israeli criminal behavior, that is the office you go to. Not in the streets, not in the somewhere. Like, I'm not being bombed out of existence by the streets around the White House. I'm being bombed out of existence by the state of Israel. And the state of Israel has an office in your country, and you have the responsibility to shut down that office and expel the defender of Israeli apartheid who occupies it. Governments are not going to expel Israeli criminals. Governments are not going to impose sanctions on this apartheid regime. The people will, and the people should, and the people must. I'm not making this stuff up. Back in November 1984, a large number of anti-apartheid Americans decided to protest outside the embassy of apartheid South Africa, day in, day out. What they did back then was deemed illegal. So after 9,000 arrests and after 13 months of sit-ins and protests, day in, day out for 13 months, the embassy of apartheid South Africa was shut down. The state of Israel is not more important to the Western world than apartheid South Africa was. At the end of the day, like, the state of Israel is useful for the military industry of the Western powers or the superpowers. It doesn't have resources like uranium or gold or diamond or even tea. So it's much, much easier to actually deal with this apartheid regime than how activists and anti-apartheid activists around the world dealt with the previous apartheid regime in the south of Africa. So yes, we will be murdered continuously by this criminal regime, but currently we are being murdered with complicity of the Brazilian government. Once the Israeli embassy is shut down, like it was carried out in Colombia, Bolivia, Venezuela, Chile, we need Brazil to unfortunately, to follow. For so long, Brazil was followed in the struggle for social justice. But they're too late now. They're too late. And better late than never. In a previous interview, I was looking about, I would understand like why a fascist like Bolsonaro would maintain relations with the state of Israel during this genocide, right? I understand that. But I do not understand why Lula is behaving like a Bolsonaro. I don't understand that. And I don't want anybody in Brazil to explain it to me, and I don't want anybody to understand it.